What's up there, my friends? How's it going today? On this fine, beautiful day. I'm sitting here in kind of my plant heaven, my little corner here. Fortunately, I have the water to water my plants without feeling guilty because I live in the Pacific Northwest. And that's what I wanted to talk about here was the looming water crisis and the shortage around the world and what it really means for us. First off, before I forget, I'd like to say thank you to Benjamin. I received this shirt in the mail today from one of my customers/subscribers, and it was his own design. It's called Mind Map, and I really like it. It has some wonderful material. I just wanted to say thank you if you're out there. I haven't sent him an email yet, but it's a really cool thing. It reminds me of a Shipibo ship design from this bandana I have, but anyhow, to talk about water, it seems like such a trivial thing for somebody who grew up in Oregon, Portland, Oregon, and lives right across the bridge in Vancouver, Washington. I can drive a half an hour east of here and be in crystal clear rivers. Beautiful. And I'm of the mindset that no matter what happens in the world catastrophe, within my lifetime I'll never run out of water. I will always be able to access water somewhere around here, at least from the rainfall. But there are some areas that are much more precarious, where the weather shifts just a little bit, and perhaps they don't get their rains. And no better example of this than what's going on right now in India. The city of Chennai, India, is a city of about 10 million people. That's a lot of people. They have just run out of water completely. Their reservoir is 1/100th of what it was at the same time last year. And they haven't had their monsoon rains. And people are migrating out, moving away, staying with family and friends. The people who are wealthy enough can afford to have water imported in tanker trucks, and those who can't, they don't. And the poor have to go get a bucket load whenever they can. Now, these water shortages are above and beyond the billion or so people who don't even have access to fresh drinking water. The people who may have access to water, but it's not good water. And so much preventable illness out there. But I don't want to go too deep into that. The 10 million right now in that city are pale in comparison to the prediction for, by the year 2020, they expect, I believe, 6 or 7 major cities in India will be out of water or close to it, which is a total of around 100 million people, including New Delhi. And this is just, India. You look at what happened in California from 2007 to 2016. They had a 1,200-year drought. It hasn't been that short on water in 1,200. And then a year later, it rained like crazy. California was just loaded with floods. And in the mind of a lot of people, they say, well, we may have been out of water for a while, but now it's good. We've got water, and it doesn't work that way. It would take 4 full years of rains like that to replenish the groundwater supply, which is a majority of the water that we utilize is from the ground. And give you the facts and figures about how much water we actually have, because a lot of folks think about desalinating water, taking the salt out and getting fresh water that way. It's very expensive, very cumbersome. It's not going to work everywhere. But as far as the water that's in the world, less than, I believe it's 2.5%. Less than 2.5% is actual fresh water. Out of that fresh water, 68% of that is locked up in glaciers, and another 30% is locked up in inaccessible at the moment aquifers. So we're looking at less than 1% of water is accessible. A very small percentage is in lakes and rivers, and as those dry up, we run into the same problem. Mexico City, over the past few years, has been sinking at 9 inches per year as they drain the aquifer. And you picture sitting on a balloon, a water balloon, and slowly siphoning the water out from underneath you. That's exactly what's happening there. And not only that, but they import, I believe it's something like 70% of their water, 80% of the water has to be imported to Mexico City. can we look to any examples of a good way to recycle and recapture water? And I hate to say it, but Israel is actually the golden boy when it comes to this, because they've had the time and the money and the resources to actually try to conserve water. They recapture 86% of their drain water and reuse it. The next best country is Spain, who only recaptures 19%. And of course, this wasn't something that every country had to look to. 50 years ago, planning for a future of conserving water wasn't something that we were really looking at, nor was it something that we really had the technology to do. We can clean the water, but as for cleaning water efficiently, and especially drain water and sewage water, and if you look around the world, there's different bottling plants, say for just Coca-Cola. And in one place they may use spring water or groundwater. In another place they use tap water. In some places they use whatever they can find, basically, whatever type of water, desalinated water in some places. So there's many different places where we get water. And the idea that we have fresh water available at all times is really something that we need to overcome. Now, what about the individual? We're made to feel guilty about wasting water. All the commercials and all the PSA ads about, don't waste water, turn off your hose, don't water your lawn. We can get to that point, but it really is regional, and it depends on where you live. They just discovered an aquifer off the northeast coast of the U.S. that starts somewhere near New Jersey up, and it goes, I believe it starts at about 600 feet under the seafloor and extends to about 1,200 feet below there. And they believe when the oceans had receded during the last ice age and the glaciers were pushing down on North America, as they receded, many of the rivers and tributaries ran down under the ground and filled in this porous rock. Then the sea moved in. So there's tons of fresh water locked away, but some of it may be mixed with seawater further down. The point being that there's a lot of water we can't access or haven't accessed yet. And that's great for the U.S., for the eastern U.S., but that's not going to help anybody else. And I believe it's 670 cubic miles of water they think is locked up. So anyway, that's just one positive spin to throw on things. But let's look at some of the countries that in the areas that are actually running out of water. Cape Town, South Africa, Brazil, India, of course, as I mentioned. Beijing, China, is running out of water as they grow. Los Angeles, California, as we well know, and a lot of areas of California import their water and have, diverted a variety of, sources in order to get their water. The problem is that over the years, more farmers and more people have more of a draw on the water, and then when the rain doesn't fall as we need it to, and the aquifers and dams are backed up, then we run into trouble. So there's also Las Vegas, and that place, for as far as I'm concerned, it's just a fruitful endeavor that was fruitless from the start, if you will. You don't water the desert. It's just they're going to run out of water eventually. Jakarta, Indonesia, right now is running out of water too. And like I said about Los Angeles, they import 86% of their water from 300 miles or more away. So all of these things are considerations we should have for the future, and I'll get to why. By 2050, they predict there will be a 30% increase in demand for water, and I think that's a conservative estimate. I mean, by 2050, maybe it's the opposite. Maybe we'll have no demand if the people keep up, the way we're going, but theoretically, if we keep growing the way we are, there will be a 30% more increase in water. And since water's disappearing by the same rate, where will the people go? They'll immigrate. And a lot of folks are very opposed to immigration because of obvious reasons, but I'm not going to get into the politics surrounding this, but I want people to consider how, as an Oregonian growing up, a lot of the people in my town had stickers that said Californians go home. And this was back in the 80s, mind you, and early 90s. And I read a lot of, articles from people saying, hey, all the Californians are moving up here. They're causing, the prices to go up, the land to go up, and, why don't they just stay in California type of mentality. And the other side of that was, people can move wherever they want. It's the United States of America, so be it. Yet people still have these protective measures on their own states, because we know we have finite resources, and a future is going to be limited. We're going to be growing on our own. The more people that move to one state, obviously the more of a demand on the resources there is. But for a while, the state could keep growing. As soon as the resources are at a max, then we run into a problem. I wanted people to realize that is so similar to somebody from California moving here because they're out of water. To me, is really no different from somebody in Mexico wanting to move to California because they're out of food or water or under threat. Under the right terms, let's say. But what I'm saying is I'm not trying to make a point on immigration, but rather to say in the future, there's going to be a hell of a lot more of the people. And so if you're strongly opposed to immigration, it's not going to get better. It's going to get worse. So what does that mean? It means that if we have access to water and we have access to goods, people will go there. This is the way it's always been. And who knows what the pockets are going to remain that are going to be viable, We have entire cities built in areas where there won't be any resources left. So what can we do? Well, we can protect our resources, of course. Collect rainwater. There have been some very successful areas where rainwater collection has stored massive, amounts of rainwater. This is very important in areas where either there's a lot of especially where there's monsoon season, for example. I live in the Pacific Northwest. There's rain all the time. I could collect rainwater, but I don't expect to run out. If you live in an area where you're dependent upon monsoons and the monsoon season doesn't come, then you're in some serious trouble, and that's what's happening in India right now. What else can we do? First off, the American idea of the lawn, that was a European idea. The idea of having grass in your yard and a beautiful lawn, for those who don't know, was basically a rich man's thumb up to the farmers. It was a way of people saying, I can afford to maintain a huge, pointless, beautiful chunk of grass, and I don't have to grow food on my land because I have the wealth, and it's not necessary. And that's where lawns came from. Well, I understand if people want to have a little lawn. I've got a yard, sure. I don't water it in the summer anymore, but I believe that golf courses are one of the biggest wastes of water, and many of the areas where golf courses exist are in places where there's desert, where there's desolation. You see these beautiful green golf courses in the middle of nowhere, and you think, where are they getting this water? Sure, sometimes there's an underground aquifer to pump from, but like I said, aquifers get depleted over time. So, whatever. If people want to hit a little round ball around and justify wasting that much water for that grass, all I can say is maybe grow grass that's compatible with the area that you're playing in. But that might be too much to ask. But all of these are small things. Golf courses aren't the problem. Lawns aren't the problem. Not collecting our rainwater is not the problem. In fact, farming smart might be besides watering the desert, as many people do, farming smart might be the most important, crucial step we can take. And we've changed a lot of our farming methods and have improved upon this, conserving more water, enclosing aquifers and reservoirs, and this has helped, but farming uses 70% of the water, the fresh water that we use, and one of the biggest issues, say for Texans, they complain because say across over in some areas in Mexico, there was a dispute because the farmers there were using the limited water to grow alfalfa, and alfalfa is a feed crop. So then it comes down to meat production, and all of these things are tied in together. And the fact that all this water is tied up in glaciers doesn't mean that we're ever going to be able to use it. Once it's diluted into the oceans, there's no way for us to utilize the Arctic ice. So we're really trapped to I believe it's 0.03% or maybe up to 0.3% of the water that's actually available to us. And like I said, for somebody living where I live, why should I care? It's because I care about people. I know what it would be like. I can't say I know what it would be like, but I can only imagine what it would be like to run out of water in your town. And in many of these places, it's It's completely worsened by huge corporations coming in and wasting water for their manufacturing facilities, or straight up taking a well, putting a fucking lock on it, and forcing the people to pay for their own water, which happens all over in Africa. And, you know, if you want to see something disgusting, just look up locked well, Google anything having to do with locked wells, having people pay for their water, and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. Whenever I say things like that, I assume most people are aware of what's going on, but I quickly realize most people don't have a clue how bad it really is out there. It's easy for us to live in our little bubbles, you know? It would be easy for me not to give a shit, but I can't. I just can't. I feel so, you know, I'm torn. I'm ambivalent about the whole thing. You know, partially, you know, if you're born in circumstances, you know, where that's where you live and that's all you know and you can't afford to get away, then there's not much, you know, you're not to blame. Of course, if a person moves to an area, you know, some beautiful desert, and then they complain because they're running out of water, then that's kind of their own fault, in my ideas. In my opinion, it's about using common sense. It's kind of like the people who move into the floodplains, you know, on the Mississippi, and they've had their houses flooded out 5, 10 times, and they continue to siphon tax dollars to help them rebuild, and complaining on the news every year, we flooded again, we flooded again. You know, it's like sometimes you have to just cut your losses, if you will. But it's hard for us to let go. Just look at New Orleans. It'll be underwater in 30 years, but for now we're trying to hang on to it. And a lot of future problems are going to arise because of the way that we do business. We're going to have to move away from the coastlines, and we're going to have to start conserving our water a little better, because water is the key to life. All the peak oil fears and the way people talk about the decline of the economy, all of these things pale in comparison to not being able to drink water. So all I can say is, beyond learning how to filter and clean your own water, perhaps if you live in an area like that, learn how to garden, learn how to farm smart, you know, using minimal amount of water, you know, use a soaking hose or, you know, something to try to conserve what you can, at least to just kind of train yourself, you know, because, you know, we just don't realize how much we waste. In a lot of countries, they have an average of, you know, in Uganda and some other African countries, they have the average of about 4 gallons of water per person per day. The average American uses 151, so go figure. Hope you learned something. Thanks for coming along. Thanks for watching. And I'm going to go get a drink of water. Take care.